This is my life, and this is how it reads. For every chapter, 1,000 memories.
My parents were both readers, but they were very kind of like different readers. My mom was like a recipe, cookbook, women's magazine reader. She always had like Ladies Home Journal and Women's Day and Good Housekeeping, and then Red Book, which I was not allowed to read. I distinctly remember and I never knew what was in Red Book. And then my dad was kind of like revisiting the high school classics sort of reader, so he would, and he was like a library. My dad was the one who would always take us to the library. But my dad would he'd be like reading The Catcher in the Rye, and then he would go get the newest John Irving book, and so he was more of like a novel sort of reader. But they really always encouraged me to read too, so I was just a constant, reader. And I think my childhood, in a lot of ways, I was bored a lot. So I always was a voracious reader. One thing I always remember my mom and I having this conflict about is she was like, you need to go outside and play. You need to run. You got it. All you do is read. And so I would take my book and go sit in the tire swing and crack it open and start reading. So they encouraged literacy, and even when my mom was I know she was just laughing at me in the kitchen when I would take my book out and read in the tire swing. So it worked out okay. But so they were very encouraging of reading, but they also always modeled reading.
I always feel like somebody's watching me, and I have no privacy. Oh, I always feel like somebody's watching me.
When I look back on this teacher, she is the opposite of me as a teacher, which I think, as I reflect, is really interesting. But when I got to 12th grade, I took AP English. So that was my first, kind of extended, English class and whatever. And I took it very seriously, because at that point I was like, I'm going to be an English teacher. So AP English, I was like, this is my class. And she was a stickler in a way that I never was and would not want to be, and was taught not to be, actually. But in other ways, she was exactly what I needed at that time. So she was the first teacher I had who was this is a cliche and you can't use those. And I was like, oh, okay. I really appreciated that. Even at the time, I was like, okay, she's helping me be a better writer. I do know that my feedback tends more toward the matter of fact than the nicey-nicey. Yeah. And I have a feeling that part of that does come from her, and from, it's not going to do anybody any good for me to praise something that's not worth praising, right? So I do think I've carried that along in terms of student writing feedback. But I'd like to think, because with Mrs. Fraley it was this is how you read Hamlet, and I'd like to think that I don't have as much of that as she did, because I know if you don't read Hamlet that way, then what do you do, or what do you learn from that person? So yeah, so good and bad lessons in my literacy education.
But these stories don't mean anything when you've got no one to tell them to.